What if I told you that friendship, as you've been taught to believe in it, doesn't actually exist? That behind every loyal companion, every warm connection, and every emotional bond, there is a quiet, unspoken contract of usefulness. People don't just like you, they need something from you. Maybe it's your strength, your status, your stability, or even your silence. And when you can no longer provide it, the affection fades. This isn't cynicism, it's clarity. Because when you stop chasing unconditional love and start observing the patterns of power, interest, and influence, you stop being fooled and start being free. In this video, we unravel the Stoic truth behind human relationships. You'll learn why manipulation is everywhere, how power dictates loyalty, and why seeing people clearly is not cruelty, but wisdom. So if you're ready to protect your peace and reclaim your self-respect, stay with me. And if this resonates, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's build a mind that sees through illusion and stands strong in truth.
Number 1.
Friendship is an invisible contract. We like to tell ourselves that friendship is sacred, that it is pure, loyal, and unconditional. We hold on to the idea that someone, somewhere, will stand by us simply because of who we are, not what we offer. But this belief, while comforting, is rarely tested in the fire of real life. It is in our lowest moments, when we are no longer useful, no longer entertaining, no longer powerful, that the truth about our relationships is revealed. And most of us are not ready for what we'll see. The Stoics were. They never sugar-coated the nature of human interaction. Seneca, writing from both the peak of influence and the edge of exile, knew that relationships were almost always built on mutual utility. He said, "When friendship is settled, you must trust. Before friendship is formed, you must pass judgment." That line, often ignored, is a quiet warning. Not every smile is sincere, and not every companion is a friend. Some walk beside you because your path is convenient. Others walk beside you because you light the way for them. But when your light dims, watch who remains. Friendship, then, is not a fairy tale. It is an invisible contract, a silent exchange of value, sometimes emotional, sometimes intellectual, sometimes purely transactional. And this doesn't make people evil. It makes them human. To deny this is not virtue, it is delusion. The Stoic doesn't seek to shame others for this reality, but to see it clearly, because only through clarity can we preserve our peace. Marcus Aurelius approached relationships like a physician diagnosing symptoms. In Meditations, he wrote, "People exist for one another. Teach them then or bear with them." Notice that word, bear. He didn't say love them blindly. He didn't say trust them eternally. He said bear with them. Because people will fail you. They will leave when things get hard. They will change when your value to them changes. And if you are unaware of this, you will be shattered every time someone walks away. Now look at your own life. Who shows up when there is no spotlight, no audience, no gain? Who listens when your words are not inspiring, but heavy with silence? Who calls you when they no longer have anything to gain? That is the test, and for most people, the answer is sobering. We often mistake proximity for loyalty, but someone being close to you doesn't mean they're with you. They may simply be near your power, your presence, or your resources. Remove those, and their presence fades. Even modern figures reflect this ancient truth. Take the example of Howard Hughes, a man of immense wealth, influence, and mystery, surrounded by advisors, assistants, admirers. But in the end, he died alone, unrecognizable, in isolation. Where were the so-called friends? They were never his. They were his access points. Or look at someone like Amy Winehouse. The world praised her when she shined, but in her collapse, few were willing to sit in her darkness without judgment or personal agenda. These aren't stories of betrayal, they're stories of silent contracts, contracts that expired. This is why Epictetus insisted on emotional sovereignty. Seek not that events should happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and you will go on well. When applied to friendship, this means stop expecting people to be loyal beyond what they are capable of. Stop hoping for unconditional love from those who barely love themselves. Instead, watch, observe, and value those who stay, not because they have to, but because they choose to. And yet it's tempting to confuse length with loyalty, to say, we've known each other for years, they would never leave. But time doesn't guarantee depth. Familiarity doesn't equal integrity. The Stoics would remind us that everything external is fleeting, including the consistency of those around us. You can't build your inner peace on outer permanence, because outer permanence doesn't exist. Now, to be clear, this isn't about becoming cold or shutting people out. The Stoic path is not about rejection, it is about recognition. Recognizing the conditions that bind most relationships gives you the power to navigate them without bitterness. You begin to understand that when people pull away, it may not be a betrayal, it may be a recalibration. They're realigning their lives with their interests. It's not noble, but it's not shocking either. Socrates understood this deeply. His disciples were many, but as his philosophy grew inconvenient, so did their support. He didn't demand their loyalty, he accepted their limits. In the same way, we too must accept that loyalty is rare and that most relationships operate under hidden terms. When we do, we stop suffering from imaginary losses and start seeing people for who they truly are, not who we imagine them to be. And this awareness doesn't kill connection, it clarifies it. You begin to reserve your emotional investment. You stop bleeding for people who would not scrape a knee for you. You begin to give not out of fear of losing someone, but out of strength, knowing that if they leave, you'll still be whole. This is not the death of love, it is the birth of boundaries. More importantly, when you stop expecting unconditional friendship, something beautiful happens. You begin to value the rare moments of real connection. The people who stay, not out of benefit, but out of bond, become precious, and because you never assumed they owed you anything, their presence becomes a gift, not a right. So what do we do with this understanding? We practice what the Stoics called ataraxia, tranquility of mind. We no longer place our emotional stability on the shoulders of unpredictable people. We center it within ourselves, and we engage with others not from need but from strength. You can love them, support them, even grieve them, but you never let them define you. That is the Stoic way, not to walk alone, but to walk awake, to care without clinging, to give without expectation, and to understand that the world doesn't owe you loyalty. If someone stays, appreciate it, but if they leave, let them, because the one person who must never abandon you is you.
Number 2.
Manipulation runs beneath every bond. To see through people is not cruelty, it is clarity. And clarity begins when you understand that every human interaction contains influence. Sometimes obvious, sometimes subtle, but always there. Manipulation, in its truest form, is not evil. It's simply the pressure of one will upon another. It's the art of guiding perception, nudging action, shaping response. And while it often carries a negative tone, the Stoics would say, don't label it first, observe it, because when you see how people move, you can choose whether or not to move with them. The mistake we make is believing that manipulation only comes from the wicked, that it's reserved for liars, narcissists, or abusers. But in truth, it's woven into everyday life. When someone flatters you, pauses before delivering bad news, posts a carefully crafted apology on social media, there's intent behind it, there's positioning, there's image control, that is manipulation, And the danger isn't that it exists. The danger is that you don't see it happening. The Stoics knew this well. Epictetus warned us not to get swept up in the opinions of others. If someone speaks ill of you, he said, instead of trying to defend yourself, ask whether what they said is true. Why? Because responding out of ego puts you under their control. You begin to perform for their validation or defend against their judgment. In both cases, you are no longer acting freely, you are reacting. This is the essence of social manipulation, not always malicious, but always directional. People want a certain reaction from you, a laugh, a nod, a compliment, a favor, and over time, these micro-demands begin to shape how you speak, what you share, even how you see yourself. Unless you become conscious, you become conditioned. Let's ground this in reality. Consider Marilyn Monroe. Loved by millions, praised, photographed, immortalized. But underneath the icon was a woman often controlled by studios, agents, and lovers who used her charm to feed their own power. Even her softness, her innocence, was manipulated into a brand. She became what others wanted to see, not who she truly was. And when she began to push back, when she showed her pain, her anger, her clarity, people pulled away. Why? Because she was no longer easy to use. This isn't just about celebrities, it happens in families, in offices, in friendships. When someone only compliments you when they want something, when silence is used to punish, when favors are disguised as generosity but followed by guilt, these are all forms of manipulation. And again, it doesn't mean people are evil, it means they are human, and many are unconscious of their own strategies. It's not just the actions people take, it's also the emotions they weaponize. Guilt, shame, flattery, fear, all of them used, often unknowingly, to pull you off center. And once you're off center, you become easier to steer, easier to please, easier to control. That's when you lose your sovereignty, without even realizing it. The Stoics, unlike modern self-help gurus, didn't try to teach people how to control others. They taught how to become unshakable in the face of influence. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it." This wasn't just about enduring hardship. It was about enduring pressure, especially the emotional pressure others impose to shape your actions. When someone gives you a compliment, pause. When someone criticizes you, pause. When someone offers help, ask yourself, what do they gain if I accept? When someone says, you've changed, ask, have I changed? Or have I simply stopped giving them the version of me they like to manipulate? Because manipulation thrives in your blind spots. The compliment that makes you more compliant, the guilt trip that makes you apologize for something you didn't do, the praise that keeps you tied to a role you've outgrown. These are the subtle ways people steer you away from your sovereignty. Now some will say, but isn't this paranoid? No, paranoia is fear of things that don't exist. Stoic clarity is the acceptance of what does. And what exists, undeniably, is a world where people use emotion, timing, silence, and affection to get what they want. You don't have to hate them for it. You just have to see it and choose your response. Socrates practiced this in conversation. When someone tried to trap him in a rhetorical game, he didn't react emotionally. He questioned them into confusion, not to win, but to expose the pressure and step out of it. That is the Stoic model, not resistance through aggression, but through awareness. You don't push back, you step aside, and in doing so, you keep your peace. Because once you recognize manipulation, it loses its power. You're no longer triggered, you're no longer dancing to someone else's rhythm. You become anchored, centered, and from that place, you can choose to engage or not. But the choice is yours again. This is why the Stoics emphasize self-examination, not to obsess over flaws, but to become aware of influence. Ask yourself, who do I perform for? Who do I silence myself for? Who do I chase, not out of love, but out of fear of losing approval? These are not light questions, but they lead to liberation. And what happens when you liberate yourself from invisible influence? You stop shape-shifting. You stop shrinking. You stop apologizing for outgrowing someone's expectations. Instead, you live as yourself, fully, clearly, without fear. That is the reward of Stoic observation. Not distance from others, but closeness to yourself. Real connection can only begin when performance ends. When you no longer need to be liked to feel secure, when you no longer fear rejection because you know who you are, and when someone tries to guide you subtly through flattery, shame, silence, or charm, you simply smile and say nothing, not out of arrogance, but out of freedom. Because the most powerful person in the room is never the loudest. It's the one who cannot be moved without their own consent. That is who you must become, not to win, but to remain, not to dominate, but to stay free. So let them compliment you, let them criticize you, let them fall silent. You observe, you remain calm, and most importantly, you remain yourself.
Number 3.
Power dictates loyalty. We like to believe that loyalty is a virtue, that the people around us remain because of love, respect, or shared history. But if you look closer, truly look, you'll begin to see that loyalty is often not about character. It's about context, and the strongest context in any human relationship is power. When you are powerful, financially, socially, emotionally, people orbit you. They return your messages. They laugh at your jokes. They check in when you go quiet. But remove that power, that influence, that glow, and what happens? Many vanish, not because they hated you, but because they never truly saw you. They saw what you represented, what you could offer, what you could open for them. That was the real bond. And when the benefit disappeared, so did they. The Stoics were not surprised by this. In fact, they expected it. Seneca, who had the ear of Emperor Nero and was once the most powerful philosopher in Rome, eventually saw the empire turn on him. He wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." This poverty is not just material, it's relational. People crave status, proximity, visibility, and so they become loyal to whoever gives it to them. But when your position shifts, when you fall out of favor, when you lose the stage, the status, or the story they admired, you'll witness a quiet exodus. Calls go unanswered, texts go unread, invitations dry up. This isn't betrayal, this is economics. The emotional marketplace adjusts when your stock drops. And those who once seemed devoted were only leasing space in your life. They were never fully invested. This is why Marcus Aurelius trained his mind not to cling to praise. He reminded himself daily that people are drawn to appearances, not substance. Consider how much more pain is brought by the anger and grief caused by such acts than the acts themselves, he wrote. In other words, it's not the disloyalty that hurts. It's the illusion you built around it. The belief that someone's presence meant permanence. The fantasy that connection meant commitment. Let's consider a modern example. Take someone like Elon Musk. For years, he was praised as a visionary, a genius, a savior of technology. But the moment public sentiment shifted, so did the loyalty of the press, of followers, of supporters. Some backed away not because he changed, but because their benefit from associating with him changed. Whether you admire him or not, the lesson remains. People are loyal to the power you project, not necessarily the person you are. And this isn't confined to celebrities or leaders. It happens on every level. In offices, people gravitate toward whoever holds authority. In friend groups, they mirror whoever gets the most attention. In families, they align with whoever controls resources or affection. This is not always conscious, but it is always present. Even in everyday life, observe how dynamics shift the moment you gain or lose access, popularity, or visibility. The pattern is universal. The Stoics urge us to prepare our hearts for this. Epictetus said, "Attach yourself to what is within you, because what is outside, status, admiration, popularity, comes and goes like the tide. If your peace depends on the loyalty of people who only know you at your best, then your peace is rented, not owned." This is where emotional resilience begins, not in isolation, but in detachment. Detachment from the need to be liked, from the urge to be seen, from the temptation to interpret every departure as betrayal. When you no longer expect the world to stay, you stop feeling so broken when it leaves. You become steady, and in that steadiness, you start to see clearly. Loyalty that survives your silence is loyalty that matters. So what does this mean for you? It means that when you rise, you must be cautious of who gathers, and when you fall, you must be observant of who remains, because power is a spotlight and everyone looks better under it. But real loyalty is revealed in the shadows. When the lights go out and there's nothing left to take, that is the ground where truth stands. And here's the paradox. When you stop expecting loyalty from others, you become more loyal to yourself. You stop molding your personality to maintain influence. You stop performing to preserve connections. You start walking in truth, not transaction. That's what Marcus meant when he said, "Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look." Because here's the hard truth. If someone's loyalty ends when your power ends, it was never loyalty, it was leverage. And you must learn to see the difference, not with bitterness, but with vision. Clarity is not cold, it is protective. It's the ability to stand in your own worth even when others no longer benefit from it. Oprah Winfrey once spoke about this. She said, "The best thing about losing everything is that you find out who everybody really is." She noticed that when she was broke and starting out, there were only a few people who truly stood by her, and those were the people she held close for life. The rest, they weren't enemies. They were just part of the crowd drawn to light, not to her essence. So don't chase loyalty, observe it, don't demand it, measure it. Loyalty is not loud. It is quiet presence. It is who stands with you when the applause stops. It is who speaks truth to you when flattery would be easier. And it is who reminds you of your strength, not because they need it, but because they believe in it. And when you find even one such person, cherish them, but never depend on them. Because as the Stoics taught, your inner fortress must be built so strong that no man's absence can break it. Let them come, let them go, but you remain.
Number 4.
The strategy behind empathy. We live in an age where empathy is often praised as the highest virtue. We're told to be kind, to be understanding, to be emotionally available. But there is a deeper truth the Stoics knew long before empathy became a trending value. Empathy is not always what it seems. In fact, it can be performed, it can be strategic, and in many cases it can be used as currency, offered publicly but withdrawn privately. The Stoics never rejected compassion, but they were suspicious of emotion without integrity. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by courtiers and flattery, constantly reminded himself, "Don't be deceived by the applause of the crowd." He knew that kindness, when motivated by appearances, is not kindness, it is theater. And today we are drowning in that theater. Empathy has become a performance. People post prayers online while ignoring calls for help in real life. They comment hearts on someone's grief while privately avoiding their pain. They offer words, not presence, smiles, not sacrifice, support only when it costs them nothing. And when the crisis is over, When the attention fades, so does their concern. That kind of empathy isn't care. It's currency, a social signal, a way to be seen as good without doing the hard work of being good. Stoicism cuts through this illusion, Seneca said. A man's worth is no greater than his ambitions. And what is ambition in the age of visibility? It's to appear kind, to appear loyal, to appear emotionally intelligent. But the Stoic doesn't care how things look. He cares how things are. When everything is curated, clarity becomes rebellion. Now, this doesn't mean real empathy is dead, but it is rare. And that rarity is exactly why we must learn to recognize the difference. Real empathy is not loud. It doesn't draw attention to itself. It sacrifices without spectacle. It sits with you in silence. It shows up when there is no benefit, no audience, and no reward. It costs something, and that cost, time, energy, emotional risk, is what most people are unwilling to pay. Consider the life of Anthony Bourdain. He traveled the world, listened deeply, connected with people across every culture and class. He gave his attention, his presence, his raw honesty. But when he began to unravel, when he slipped beneath the surface, most didn't know, and many who praised his empathy were silent in his pain. That's the paradox. You can pour out your soul to the world and still be surrounded by people who only reflect your light, but never feel your darkness. This gap between perception and reality is where suffering grows. You may believe you're supported because people watch your stories or leave a comment, but when the pain is no longer poetic, when it's quiet, messy, and unfiltered, few are willing to meet you there. Stoic clarity helps prepare you for that moment. When you stop confusing visibility for closeness, you stop feeling abandoned by those who were never truly with you. So what do we do with this? First, stop confusing words with care. People will say what sounds right. They will echo empathy because it is fashionable. But when you need them, truly need them, they are absent. Not because they are cruel, but because they never signed up for the weight of your reality. They were here for the image of compassion, not the substance. The Stoics taught us to look beyond appearances. Epictetus reminded his students to practice what you preach. In modern terms, don't be dazzled by someone's emotional vocabulary. Watch their actions. Do they show up when it's inconvenient? Do they listen when there's nothing in it for them? Do they offer presence without needing credit? And more importantly, do you? Because this lesson isn't just about spotting the false in others. It's about confronting it in yourself. When you say you care, do you act on it? When you express support, do you follow through? Or is your empathy just as performative, just quieter? This is where Stoicism becomes both shield and mirror. It protects you from the emptiness of false connection and reflects back the places where your intentions need purifying. It reminds you that to be truly kind, you must be truly brave. And to be truly empathetic, you must be willing to carry weight, not just witness it. Oprah Winfrey once said, "Real integrity is doing the right thing, knowing that nobody's going to know whether you did it or not." That is Stoic empathy. Invisible, consistent, uncelebrated. In a world obsessed with recognition, that kind of empathy is power. It's not soft, it's not submissive, it's durable because it's rooted in principle, not performance. So when someone says they care, watch how they respond to your silence. When you're no longer performing strength, when you're vulnerable, unsure, quiet, who leans in? Who disappears? These are your answers. Pain doesn't just reveal your strength, it reveals their truth. And when someone shows up without needing attention for it, that's not just kindness, that's rare character. And the same standard applies to you. When someone withdraws, when they're no longer fun, no longer useful, do you lean in or do you vanish? Stoic empathy doesn't chase applause. It offers itself quietly, steadily, without ego. It never uses someone's pain as a platform. It never uses someone's suffering as a shortcut to virtue. Because here's the truth. Your power is not in how many people you comfort in public. It's in how many you show up for when no one is watching. That is what defines your character. That is what Stoicism demands. Not to feel less, but to feel rightly. To act not from impulse, but from principle. And once you begin living this way, something changes. You stop being surprised by people's absence. You stop being shattered by their distance. You understand that most cannot give what they've never received themselves. That false empathy is not betrayal. It is limitation. And from that understanding, you forgive, you release, you detach. So give when it's hard, show up when it's inconvenient, but do so because it's who you are, not because it will be seen, and expect nothing in return. That's how the Stoics practiced empathy, quiet, fierce, free. Because in the end, the most powerful form of care is this: presence without performance, attention without agenda, loyalty without witness. And when you live by that standard, you stop needing others to be more than they are. You don't harden, you refine. You don't close off, you clarify. You don't collapse when people fail you. You rise, not in spite of the world, but above it. If you've made it this far, you're already ahead of most. Because while others chase illusions of unconditional friendship, loud loyalty, or flawless empathy, you now see the deeper currents beneath it all. Not to judge others, but to stop being hurt by what was never real. This is the Stoic gift. Not detachment from people, but detachment from false hope. When you understand that most bonds are conditional, most compliments are calculated, and most loyalty is power-based, you don't close your heart, you protect it. You don't isolate, you elevate. You love more clearly, you give more wisely. And above all, you remain unbroken when the world changes, because your peace no longer depends on who stays, who praises, or who claps. It depends only on you. If this video spoke to something in you, like and subscribe. Your journey deserves truth, not noise. And Stoicism, real Stoicism, is how you get there.